This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
A frog once said, "It's not easy being green. Mother Earth could make the same argument. For sure, Kentucky can." One group, in concert with conservation agencies across our state, is working to help keep the bluegrass green. The Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund. We go inside outdoors to see just how this group makes a difference and how people like you have helped. It's all wrapped up in a book called Kentucky Naturally, next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
I have never seen anything like this.
I can't believe I waited so long.
What will you say?
My heart was pounding.
This is Kentucky. It's deer season, and it's outstanding. 146 record book deer in the past 3 years. Modern gun season, November 8th through 23rd, with archery season open now. What do you say?
Yeah.
I can't believe I made the shot.
Get your license and deer permit now, and take aim on the thrill at fw.ky.gov.
Deer in the headlights. Watch out, Mr. Deer.
Singing with your kids in the car is one way to keep deer hazard season in mind. And should a deer catch your headlights, flash those lights, sound your horn, break its concentration to scurry it along.
There's one.
And where there's one, there may be 2 or 3 more. Deer hazard season runs through November, so be wise behind the wheel while nature runs its course. A message from Fish and Wildlife and the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety. You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. One thing we don't do on the show very often, discuss books. But there is one that's been a long time in the making. It centers on the natural scenic lands of our state that have been protected in their natural state for you and me to enjoy for all time. Title of the book, Kentucky Naturally, the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at Work, written by Thomas G. Barnes. It's devoted to a particular set of public lands. Public lands, that means we all own them. I own them. You own them. The kid on the skateboard owns them. Wilderness areas that we can visit, where people treasure, places where wildlife call home. Across the Kentucky landscape are more than 80,000 acres, a number that continues to grow every year, made possible by the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund. The 2 guests on our show are from that office. Dr. Richard Kessler, he is the chairman of the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund Board. He's also a professor of biology, and he's joining us by phone from Campbellsville University. In the studio is Zeb Weiss, biologist with the Heritage Land Fund. And gentlemen, before we get into all of this, conservation has some big shoes to fill. The author of this book, Thomas G. Barnes, we call him Tom, was scheduled to be on the show in October 2014, but passed away, tender age of 56. 56. Kentucky Afield Radio is not a somber show. We don't talk about things that bring us tears, but rather bring us joy. And I think in Tom's honor, he would want us to continue to celebrate our outdoors, even in this show, or especially in this show. What do either of the 2 of you have to say in his passing?
Well, I knew Tom for a long time. He was actually my advisor in graduate school. I worked with him on projects for KET, for HLCF, book projects, and he was just irreplaceable as far as his enthusiasm for the outdoors and his positive outlook on protecting nature and the outdoors. And Tom would be the last one to want us to be somber, because he wanted to celebrate the things that are in this book and the things that we all do to try to protect Kentucky's natural places. I'm involved, and he was involved too, with the Kentucky Native Plant Society. I'm the current president. He was the president a couple presidents ago, and I worked with him on all projects with that as well.
He clearly touched your life, Zeb Weiss. But you are one of what would you think, 100,000? More?
Well, Tom was tireless. The thing that made Tom unique, especially for a person of an academic of his stature. What made Tom unique is he would go and talk to 3 little old ladies in a garden club in Podunk County, or he would speak to a conference room full of academics. He would talk to anybody about nature. He would do photography workshops. He would speak at scientific conferences. He talked to anybody about this stuff. He breathed it, lived it. That's all he did. And when he passed away, on many Facebook pages, when it was posted, the Herald Leader ran a very nice article about Tom, and that was posted all over the place. Everybody had stories, brief stories about him reaching out to them or them reaching out to him with some question about a plant, and him spending time to talk to him about it. I mean, he would just talk to anybody about this stuff.
Plus, he was a full professor at UK.
He was a full extension professor, and he did what a lot of folks do, is he was a wildlife extension professor. So a lot of folks that work in wildlife start off and wanting to work with wildlife, with animals. And you quickly learn that if you're really going to make a difference in animals, populations, if you're going to help them out, you're really working on habitat. You're working on the plants they eat and live in. So his work with wildlife led him into doing, again, this habitat restoration work with grasslands. That led him into working with wildflowers and things that had nothing to do with wildlife. It was kind of a natural progression. But he was a full wildlife extension professor, so he did, we've been talking a lot about the plants and about the natural areas. Well, he developed a really great resource online, the Snakes of Kentucky website that you can get the UK's Extension Office, which is very detailed about the snakes that live in distributions, and he answered questions. People would call Tom if they had snakes in their yard. People would call Tom about bat questions, bats in their attic. He did a lot of stuff.
Sounds like he had the enthusiasm, childlike almost. If he was outside, pick up a butterfly and look at it, pick up a frog and put it in your pocket, take it home, that sort of thing, that he just loved what he did.
He appreciated how cool this stuff is. He was not strictly of an academic interest. He wasn't strictly looking at it for its genetics or looking for it of its utilitarian use. He just thought this stuff was cool. He thought the flowers were pretty. He thought the frogs were neat to look at. He just appreciated it.
Now, Dr. Kessler, you're an associate of Tom Barnes, Dr. Barnes, with the University of Kentucky Department of Forestry. You're with Campbellsville University. Did you all cross paths beyond your work with the Heritage Land Conservation Fund?
Yes, we did. Actually, in my tenure with the Nature Conservancy, I had some opportunities to be in the field with Tom, and Tom was one of those unique individuals that was really a great scientist, a great field biologist, but at the same time had that uncanny ability to bring science down to a level where the general public could understand and more importantly, perhaps even greatly appreciate the significance of the natural resources in Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky really has adopted Tom, and Tom has adopted Kentucky. Just being in the field with Tom, you see that enthusiasm, you see that technical expertise, whether it has to do with looking at prairie plants or spring wildflowers, or whether it's his excellent use of photography equipment and the wonderful photography that he did. It's a legacy that he has left for us that will, of course, live on for many, many generations.
Tom was certainly an academic, but anyone who knows him knows that he was a down-to-earth human being.
One thing I really appreciated about Tom was he really saw and promoted the idea that we all have a responsibility to be good stewards of the environment, whether that is the preservation of natural areas or whether it has to do something with, reducing pollution or being responsible corporate citizens. It's not just good enough that we recognize the benefits that all these things provide for us in nature. We've got a responsibility to help take care of it.
It's worth a moment, I think, Dr. Kessler, to sort of tell the story that you and I were going to have this very interview, not with Zeb Weiss, but with Tom Barnes. We were on the phone. We were waiting for him to show up at this studio. And we knew that he was running a minute or two late. Gave him a call on his cell phone, and his sister-in-law answered the phone. And it was at that point we realized that he had just passed away over the weekend. And it just hit the both of us like a ton of bricks. And I think the whole scientific community Everybody who's ever read any of his books, anybody at UK, at the Heritage Land Conservation Fund, conservation agencies across state government, the Nature Conservancy, the Nature Preserves Commission, you name it, all felt that impact. It just shows you how quickly life can change. A few minutes well spent talking about the author Tom Barnes. When we come back, we will certainly talk about the book and the lands described within the book. Kentucky Naturally, the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at work. Details of what makes each one unique when we come back. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin. I'm on the phone with Dr. Richard Kessler, chair of the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund, and his right-hand biologist, Zeb Weiss, and we're talking about the new book, Kentucky Naturally, Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at Work. Large coffee table book, easy to read, amazing photography by Tom Barnes. The writing describes some of Kentucky's best-kept secrets in conservation. Sort of reminds me of a title of one of his previous books, Kentucky's Last Great Places.
That's right. 2002.
And this book, it smells and feels like it's right off the press.
July of this past July is when it came out. Right, so it's new.
This is a coffee table book. It is hardcover. You're not going to find this online. There's no paperback, a Nook version of this or an e-reader version of it. This is hard copy.
That's correct, and it's intended to kind of do two things. It's intended to show off Tom's photography of the 120 sites that the HLCF had funded to date when it came out. Some pretty amazing pictures, and it also talk a little bit about the project, about the properties themselves, what kind of species they protect, what kind of ecosystems they protect, that kind of a thing. And most of them are open to the public, so they also provide directions on how you can go there and see what Tom photographed.
Zeb, tell me just a bit about what it is you do with the Heritage Land Group.
I'm the program coordinator and the staff biologist, so I do everything from working on the real estate end of it to help other agencies acquire these natural areas to the actual biological inventories, meaning I'll go out and net bats, or I'll go out and survey the salamander populations, that kind of stuff.
So, Zeb, it sounds like you need to know beforehand what the land has to offer before you can recommend this be a good purchase, right?
We have an application process, and so when an agency like Fish and Wildlife or state parks or county government sees a piece of property they think would make a good conservation area, they contact me. I go out there with some of the board members from the Heritage Land Fund, which are generally biologists as well, academic biologists, and we go out and check the site and just generally see if it is suitable for conservation purposes. So we want to see creeks, we want to see trees, we just want to see land that some critters can live on, basically.
And I'll just add to that when our fund was established and the program was established back around 1995. It was established to meet at least one of four criteria. Those include either natural areas that possess some kind of unique feature. That feature could be an incredible type of habitat or very rare habitat. It could be endangered species that possibly live there. Areas important to migratory birds. Areas that maybe just perform important natural functions that, if it was not protected, might be lost. A spring or a wetland that might be at risk of being developed or filled in, so you'd lose all those benefits like clean water, flood protection, rare species. And then maybe one of the most popular ones, especially with our city and county government, they are areas that, if they can be preserved in their natural state, can certainly mature, and through that process of maturation might be good sites for public use, like hiking and fishing, outdoor recreation, or environmental education.
I'm not personally a real big fan of jargon, and sometimes we overcomplicate this stuff.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is protect some land for some critters to live on, and to give the people of Kentucky a place to go and enjoy the outdoors. Whether it's to sit on a rock and think about a whole lot of nothing for a while, or whether it's to hunt or fish. Majority of our properties are open to outdoorsmen. There's a lot of scientific reasons that we could bore you with, but we're just trying to protect some land the way it always has been, to give people a place to go.
Green space is a great thing.
Green space is I think personally, it's important for people to get away from their screens and get away from their engines and their machines and their workplace and just have a place to go. And I think it's important to all of our health, mental health, as much as it is anything else.
The book Kentucky Naturally talks about the places that the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund, that's a mouthful. You're the nature plate people.
That's it.
Yeah, we hadn't mentioned that here minutes into the show, but people will drive along the highway, and especially if you're in Kentucky and you see a plate that says Nature's Finest on it, and it'll have, a bobcat, a cardinal, or viceroy butterfly. And over the years, they've had other things like dragonflies, a hummingbird, Cumberland Falls, a little yellow warbler, and I think that's it.
That's
those
all
7.
Right.
But if you've seen those over the last couple of decades, those are the license plates where money from the sale of those plates helps this Heritage Land Conservation Fund. And over the last 20 or more years, 80,000 plus acres have been purchased. We've been talking about that these are cool places to go and for critters to live and people get out and do a little living themselves. They're not all sitting there waiting for you with a resort park or hotel or fine restaurant on them. They're not all sitting there waiting with a golf course or tennis courts. These are more wilderness areas. Can you define what really is there and by statute will never be there?
The only thing that's going to be on that property is going to be trees and water. We don't allow structures. The only exception to that, as far as what something might be built environment, is if it is an environmental education facility, we might have a little picnic shelter right on the highway, and then several hundred acres behind it with nothing built on it. It's mostly hiking trails, not a lot of infrastructure. It is meant for critters and people to walk around on, not much in the way of infrastructure.
And it could be for the Department of Parks, who also benefits from this. You buy land that sort of adds to the acreage that's already there in existence.
Well, that's a great example is Natural Bridge State Park, which everybody probably is familiar with.
Sure.
At the beginning of the Heritage Land Funds in the mid-'90s, Natural Bridge was about 1,200 acres. Well, over the years, now it's up to about 2,500 acres. And that's by Heritage Land money being used to purchase all the acres surrounding it, 100 acres here, 200 acres there, to the point now where Natural Bridge State Park is essentially surrounded by the Daniel Boone National Forest, making it one of the biggest contiguous conservation areas. It's all conservation land now.
In the acknowledgments of this book, written by Tom Barnes, it says, this book project has been going on for what seems like forever. How far does forever date back?
2010, maybe?
He put a lot of miles on his vehicle, taking pictures over a 4-year period.
Zeb and Joe Dietz as well, past administrator with the fund, spent a lot of time with Tom. I went out with him on several occasions, particularly down here in the south central part of the state where I reside. But for a lot of especially the second half of those years, probably the last couple of years at least, Tom, it was difficult. It wasn't an easy book to finish because he was physically challenged with some health problems. And we mentioned earlier about the importance of having places like this for people to go to both benefit them physically and mentally. And I think Tom was a big proponent of that, and I've always been a big proponent of sort of the healing powers of nature. I just think that's kind of ironic that he found a way to get through this book and finish this book in spite of some of those health issues, trying to provide something that would entice people to get out and realize the benefits both to their bodies and their minds and their spirits in visiting some of these sites that I think is a great follow-up to his Kentucky's Last Great Places book as well. This certainly shined a light on the Heritage Land Conservation Fund and the properties that we're protecting throughout the state, which again range from a nice natural area where people can get out and hike and hang out and photograph nature to some really significant areas that host a number of endangered species and that are maybe a little too sensitive for a whole lot of
public visitation. So, again, it's just kudos to Tom and his dedication to finish a labor of love like this.
I'm noticing here you're talking about Dr. Barnes put a lot of miles traveling the state. That he did. Also lost a lot of sleep. Also put on a lot of foot miles, too. I'm looking here, for example, Highview Hill in Ohio County. The photographs that he took of the places that are now protected, it's not like you just, let's drive over to Highview Hill and take a quick shot. You have to be there. He was there, obviously, in the morning when there was fog on the Green River, and he was at a beautiful area. This isn't a drive off the road and take a snapshot type of photo. You have to be there when the flower is blooming, when the steam is rising off the creek, that sort of thing, at sunrise, at sunset. I mean, this isn't a 7-hour, 8-hour-a-day job. This could be any time, day or night.
Well, and when I'd go to sites with him, there's many times that we would go to a site and he would pick out one to take a picture of, and then he'd say, the light is going to be perfect for this picture in about 5 or 6 hours. And we spend the rest of the day doing something else to come back to that spot. And he had that eye for photography that is pretty rare in anybody, much less a professional biologist as he was. But he took a lot of care in picking out what he was going to take a picture of, the lighting, the whole 9 yards. It was pretty remarkable.
Kentucky Naturally is the name of the book. We're talking to the chairman of the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund and Zeb Weiss, Heritage Land Biologist, where some of these places are and how to get there and what you can do once you arrive. Ahead in our next half hour, I'm Charlie Baglin. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. It's Charlie Baglin. Listen, any Kentucky Afield Radio program that you would like to hear again or share with your friends, like on Facebook, you can find it in 3 different places. myhuntingandfishing.com. You can find us on iTunes and on our YouTube channel. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box. If you're also searching for what's biting where, we can turn now to our fishing report.
This is Rob Rold in the Northwestern Fishery District. Our 2 major reservoirs, Rough River Lake and Nolan River Lake, are both 11 and 12 feet below summer pool, dropping 4 to 5 inches a day. At Nolan, crappie anglers are doing very well. They're catching several good 10 to 12 inch crappie. Most productive areas seem to be from Rock Creek upstream to about a mile or 2 above Wax Marina. Fishing jigs or minnows around brush piles in the 4 to 10 foot depth range. Crappie anglers at Rough are also doing well. Crappie are also doing well at our smaller impoundments, Lake Malone, Malzay, and Carpenter Lakes. Find fairly shallow brush or structure, fish around them with jigs or minnows. That's the fishing update from the Northwestern Fishery District. Please remember to always wear your life jackets when you're on the water. It does not take long for hypothermia to set in.
Hi, this is John Williams with the Fishery Report for Southeast Kentucky at Lake Cumberland. The striped bass are schooled up pretty good, mostly on the main lake near the mouths of the major creek arms. Seeing some fish still 50 to 60 feet deep, being caught on either live bait or doll flies with curly-tailed grubs, kind of drifting or trolling those. Some fish are in the creeks, hearing some fish picked up at night on the banks. You can catch them on crankbaits. We should get more stripers moving into the creeks as the water cools down, so look for that. Also, the crappie's been good on Cumberland. Those are in the major creek arms, being caught on minnows and jigs around brush piles and treetops. Also in the district, trout have been stocked in Brickyard Ponds and at Wood Creek Lake, and we also stocked Rock Creek in McCory County this week. So also give those a try. As always, good luck and be safe.
At Kentucky and Barkley Lake, bass and crappie is kind of what I'm thinking about right now. Bass, I'm thinking a jerk bait. The water is clear. I want to have a good presentation, so I'm going to use some type of jerk bait. That type of bait covers a lot of water, and it kind of imitates a wounded forward fish. And so in that clear water, the bass can see it working from a distance, and they'll come and attack it. Crappie fishing, a couple of different options. Out on the ledges, maybe vertical fishing with a jig tipped with a minnow. The other thing would be for crappie is on these sunshiny days, finding those banks where the sun's been hitting them for a couple hours. Maybe that water temperature's a little bit warmer right there. So I'm going to cast those rocky shorelines with a curly-tailed jig or some type of inline spinner, maybe targeting those black crappie that are up there looking around for something to eat. This is Paul Royster, and hope you find a good day to go fishing.
Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and it's a good day to curl up with a good book. We'll do that right after the break.
Boys were in trouble. About 10 seconds later, he said, boys were going down.
A true story.
And it sunk right out from under us.
20 degrees.
Within seconds, one boating trip went
straight down.
The water was bone-chilling.
Once you hit that water, it's so cold you can't move.
The human body wasn't designed for this.
It took my breath away as soon as I hit it, and my hands were so cold in a matter of seconds that I couldn't pop the clip on my waders to get them off.
Conditions were so bad, it's amazing that anybody survived.
Perfect for duck hunting, but not for a swim in the middle of a river.
Going overboard is never the thought.
You have to think ahead.
Fun can turn frantic in seconds.
There's no time to react when your world just sinks out from under you.
3 hunters, 2 survivors, 1 reason.
Your life jacket's got your back.
Make sure your first mate isn't your last.
I really don't think that I could have made it without a life jacket.
Your Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, your life jacket's got your back, and the backing of sportsmen on winter water everywhere. You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and we're paging through a book today that's called Kentucky Naturally, the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at Work. The book is by Kentucky author and photographer Thomas G. Barnes, the late Tom Barnes, who left this good earth in October of 2014, just about 3 months after the book was published. Richard Kessler, chairman of the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund, and Zeb Weiss, also with the program, are my guests today. It doesn't matter if you're a hunter, a fisher, a backyard gardener, hiker, repeller. This book speaks to you. And here's one. Blue Lick State Park and Short's Goldenrod State Nature Preserve. This photograph, this had to be taken no later than 5:15 in the morning. That's a time when most of the world is fast asleep. But he wasn't, and I'm glad he wasn't, because it shows me that 5:15 in the morning is a really good time to be at Blue Licks.
That's Licking River.
Licking River.
Goes right through Blue Licks and several other properties we have funded, and it's a important habitat for an endangered species, which he has a photograph on that on the next page, the Short's Goldenrod. But he had a good... again, the point of this book is to get people to realize what these properties look like, and to get people hopefully want to support them and want to go out and enjoy them. So he had a pretty good balance of taking a picture of the rare species, of the things that were unusual, but also just the scenic spots that the average person is going to say, that looks like someplace I want to go.
Yeah, I think the book, Charlie, really has appeal on multiple levels. And one certainly is what Zeb just described, just showing people the beauty of Kentucky, and, of course, indicating which of these sites can be accessed and then what type uses are allowed on the sites, but also to promote what it takes to preserve some of these kinds of places that, I like to say these projects never just happen. It takes maybe a local citizen knows of a very special place of natural significance in their community, and they contact a biologist or a university professor, or maybe do see the Heritage Land Fund website and call Zeb. It all starts somewhere, but then there's a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through before it eventually gets protected. And the book, goes into some detail, and Tom did a great job, and our previous chair of the board, Dr. Bill Martin, provided some input as well into those the first parts of the book. It does give some nice background about the fund, as well as some of the things that we do and the reasons behind it in terms of actually bringing some of these projects completely through from start to finish.
How many projects have there been?
About 125, I think, at this point.
And that covers 80,000 or so acres. I don't know if I'm even close to right.
It's about 86 now.
86,000.
Yeah, we should be at 90 within the next year if some of our projects in the hopper go through.
Very good. Congratulations. How many counties?
67 counties, I believe.
That sounds about right. 67 counties. And, we do have multiple projects in some counties. So, for instance, we may have a project in Hart County that might be a county project. And there might be another one. For instance, we have the Green River Biopreserve, which the site just recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary with Western Kentucky University. And so you could have multiple projects occurring in one county. So there's still a number of counties that we'd love to hear from, that we'd love to have contact with to see. Certainly there are going to be natural areas worthy of preservation in every county in the Commonwealth.
And, of course, what we call a project, I believe the smallest one is an acre, and the largest one is almost 4,000 acres. So pretty variable. I would say the average one is probably a couple 300 acres, which is, once you have about 250, 300 acres, that's probably big enough where people can go and hike around and enjoy a full day, and also you're giving plenty of room for the critters to find a home as well.
Some of the more popular, like if these were state parks, you could say Lake Barkley State Resort Park or Natural Bridge, Cumberland Falls, people know instantly where these are and maybe have been there. As far as nature plate properties, what are some of the more popular ones?
Most of the state parks and wildlife management areas and state forests of any size are nature plate properties. So a lot of times, they aren't viewed as such. They're viewed as Natural Bridge State Park or Cumberland Falls State Park or Carter Cave State Park. But the Heritage Fund has purchased a lot of properties at those sites. Peabody WMA is pretty popular, and we funded 30,000-plus acres of that. Ballard WMA, there's a lot of our WMAs that we have funded. As far as the county-owned projects, Lower Howards Creek in Clark County is starting to get quite a bit of visitation. They're right off of Athens-Boonesboro Road, just on the Fayette County line. It's pretty well known now in the central Kentucky area. Horse Cave, a hidden river cave at Horse Cave, we funded most of the underground acquisition for that. So there's a lot of properties that we are involved with, which folks probably don't realize our involvement.
Do you have a favorite property, Dr. Kessler?
Charlie, that's one of those questions, like most people say, it's like trying to tell which one of your children is your favorite. And, we really feel that way about all of our projects. The state agency projects, certainly, there's some wonderful projects out there that Zeb just talked about some of those. I've got a few down here that are close to home, and of course anything on the Green River is very special to me. I just mentioned Western Kentucky's Biopreserve, Jefferson Memorial Forest. That's considered now the largest urban forest in the country. And, of course, a number of tracts that have been added to the forest were done so with support from the Heritage Land Fund.
I believe we have funded about 600 acres at Jefferson Memorial Forest, but it's approaching 7,000 acres. It's a big chunk of ground.
Wow. There's a little-known one that we were talking about going out with Tom on some of his excursions for photographing these sites, and one of the ones that I remember is the Dry Fork Gorge down in Metcalfe County, which is kind of a little hidden gem. You really feel like you're stepping back in time. It's a couple hundred acres, and you step down into this limestone gorge, and the picture in the book for that site is just stunning. And there's a couple of caves. There's also some gray bats known from that area. And that's a wonderful site. This morning I spent time at our own Clay Hill Memorial Forest up in Taylor County that's owned by Campbellsville University. That was the first project that had acreage added to it with Heritage Land funding for a private college in the Commonwealth. And I got to be out there today with, there were maybe 40 or 50 high school students from 4 different local school systems looking at salamanders and snakes today. So they're having a great time out there, and we've helped add to some of the natural area at that particular place. But I just got so many memories of going on those initial site visits to meet with the applicant, which could be a county government or a state agency, and looking at that site, putting our eyes on it for the first time, and just thinking about how great it would be to be able to preserve those sites. Laterno Woods in western Kentucky.
Yeah, Emerson Laterno Woods.
Wow.
I've heard another name for that, the 1,000-acre woods.
Yeah.
What's that, swamps, wetlands?
A large river floodplain ecosystem that a lot of people have never experienced, especially when it's actually flooded. And I can remember being out there and being invited down by Fish and Wildlife while it was flooded, and being able to just go through the area that we had protected, the huge swamp white oaks and other species down there, with water 6, 7, 8 feet up their trunks and easing through them, in a flat bottom boat. What an experience!
And, most of a significant amount of the purchase was bottomland hardwood forest in the pioneer days, and Laterno Woods is about it as far as a big chunk of ground that still looks that way. So that's another significant thing that we don't talk about a whole lot is historically. A lot of these sites that we protect kind of give you a feel for what it was once like in a much, much larger area of Kentucky. So they kind of are interesting on a historical scale as well as a natural.
So we're dating back to probably the 1700s or beyond of what Kentucky looked like.
Sure. So a lot of these places, Blanton Forest Nature Preserve in Harlan County is the largest old-growth forest in eastern Kentucky in the mountains. It looks like what a lot of eastern Kentucky, if not all, pretty much looked like a couple hundred years ago and earlier. So you can kind of step back in time a little bit, like Richie said, when you go to these places.
Each year we present a stewardship award that recognizes the efforts of land managers and directors that actually are overseeing the management of some of the properties that are purchased. And one of the awardees this year was Eastern Kentucky University because of their work at Lily Cornett Woods, which falls into that category of some of the few remaining old-growth remnants in Eastern Kentucky. And kind of when Zeb mentioned Blanton Forest, that reminded me of Lily Cornett Woods as well, which is an extremely significant, very historically relevant site that has a lot of research, a lot of visitation from folks that head down to Letcher County to see that. They don't ever forget it once they've been there.
This is an interesting book, Kentucky Naturally, the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at Work. It's written by Tom Barnes, brand new as of the summer of 2014. Now, the structure of this book, it doesn't you don't have to have a degree in biology or forestry to understand this. Written in layman's terms, the biodiversity, what lives in Kentucky, the plant life, the wildlife. Like on one per page, it'll have a photograph of these areas. Baker Natural Area I'm looking at here in Logan County. It'll tell what's there and how to get there, and what you can do basically once you get there. Access open to the public, sunrise to sunset daily, very simple thing. But there's a but coming. Some of these areas are so sensitive that they are not open to the public. We'll talk about them and their role in ecology when we come back. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We are back with our final few minutes with the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund Chairman and Chief Biologist, talking about the book Kentucky Naturally, a large coffee table-style book that describes and outlines the 86,000 acres of wilderness, forest, wildlife management areas, state parks, wild rivers, other local green space that have been purchased in part with money raised by Kentucky Nature license plates. The plates say nature's finest on them. They feature a bobcat, a cardinal, and that fire-orange viceroy butterfly. They are public property, which means that we can go there, except for a mere few. Mr. Weiss, what's the deal there?
Well, out of our 86,000 acres, I think a couple thousand are not open to the public except by permit for university field trips or research or something like that. Those are generally, I think all of them, now thinking about it, are Kentucky State Nature Preserve properties that protect federally endangered species, where if you get too much traffic, there's a danger that you're going to, trample or otherwise harm the habitat that we're supposed to be protecting in the first place. And even those that are closed to the public for now because of rare species, the long-term goal is to open them once we get enough land there to protect the resource.
So a developer comes in and says, Dr. Kessler, Mr. Weiss, I know this is a great nature preserve you've got going here, but we'll pay you X number of million to turn it into a subdivision or shopping center. The answer is still no.
The answer is still no, Charlie, an emphatic no.
No concrete.
No concrete. And, that's a big issue with conserving these natural lands is the fact that we're not making any more of them. The green space is significant, and it's important that we preserve what we've got. These properties are, as we say in the conservation world, they're preserved in perpetuity. In other words, the protections for those properties are recorded in the form of a conservation easement, and they run with the deed. They go with the deed. If that property ever was sold or transferred to another agency or something like that, that it would be protected in perpetuity.
There are plenty of studies out there that show, as a quality of life issue, that some of our cities nationwide that are doing the best have these green space areas for folks to go and enjoy.
I'm still taken by the photographs in this book. I'm looking here on page 84, Lincoln Boyhood Home National Historic Site. How Dr. Barnes got that shot, I will never know because it is breathtaking. I like some of the stories that I'm finding in here. The Lincoln County William Whitley House and Sportsman Hill, the counterclockwise horse track that was there. Was this the area where horse racing was introduced to Kentucky?
That's what they say. They say Mr. Whitley wanted horse racing in North America, I believe. It's the first, but he didn't want to have his horses run the same direction they did back in England, so he had his horses run the other way.
If I'm at Churchill Downs now, they are running counterclockwise, and so they were running clockwise in England.
I believe that's correct.
There's a Sportsman's Hill. You would walk to the top of the hill. The racetrack went around the bottom of the hill, and you could stand at the top and just turn your body around and watch the horses go all the way around the track.
And the hill is actually what we purchased with Heritage Land funds, and what the Parks Department's been working on us to do is convert the pasture and the hill into some more natural native grasses where people can still walk out there and get a feel for the horse track, but it's actually also serving some conservation purposes as well, some habitat.
There's another property that when you hear about the property, you don't really think nature and wildlife, but yet it is. The old Mackville Road, Boyle County, Danville area, a lot of roads in that county. But this particular one, the old Mackville Road, is used to go back in time than to anywhere else, because this was the road that the Union and Confederate armies used to go to the Battle of Perryville. Nature Plates stepped in and helped to buy and protect that.
That's actually a really good example of kind of compatible uses. The old Mackville Road tract that we helped purchase, which was about 80 acres, I believe, isn't going to be used for reenactments. There's not going to be any building or structures on it, but it's going to be maintained as close as possible to the period as a road. We are working with state parks to help restore the pastures into what it would have looked like in the 1860s. You know, a pasture in 1860 in Kentucky wasn't a fescue field like we think of a pasture today. It would have been the milkweeds and the goldenrods and Indian grass and the blue stem, the native plants that we would find on a typical natural grassland.
I've heard a lot of catchphrases applied to nature license plates, to the Heritage Land Conservation Fund, heritage lands are here to stay, drive home your support for the great outdoors, plates that keep the bluegrass green. It's all about green, and this is where green got its name.
I just want to say a special thank you to you. You have provided the board with a lot of direction, a lot of insight with your expertise in marketing, and we just really appreciate the work you've done for the Heritage Land Fund, particularly in the promotion of the Nature's Finest license plate. So thank you, Charlie, for your support.
And let's not forget that Charlie actually designed the original Cumberland Falls plate.
Well,
so he actually put in little time and effort.
You're making me blush, but I'm hoping to push something. People like how they look, and they like what these plates do, and it's making a difference across the state to the tune of 86,000 acres. Talking about Kentucky Naturally, it is a brand new book as of the summer of 2014. Subtitle is The Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at Work, and it outlines all the beautiful areas in the state that have been paid for by funds from the Kentucky Heritage Land Group. Part of that money comes from Kentucky Nature license plates.
I really am proud that we did get to work with Dr. Barnes on this book, and if I wish it wasn't his final book, and there might be enough of his photographs that a future Tom Barnes book might be in the offing one of these days. But I'm just really glad we got to work with him on this, because I can't think of anyone else that could have done the job that he did on it.
Dr. Kessler, any last words? We know you got to get back to teach a class.
That's correct. Again, reiterate how much we appreciate the life of Tom Barnes, and in particular the work that he did on this book on behalf of conservation of Kentucky's natural resources and the Heritage Land Fund. We appreciate your support and the support of everyone out there on our team, and that team is Kentucky Conservation. We want to keep the bluegrass green. This is certainly one way that we think has been pretty effective at doing that.
Zeb Weiss, Dr. Richard Kessler, thank you so much. It's been enlightening.
Thanks, Charlie.
Kentucky Naturally, the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund at Work by author and photographer Thomas G. Barnes. Find it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at your favorite bookseller. We're out of time. My name is Charlie Baglin, inviting you to join us in a week, and we will go inside outdoors again, right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.